Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Series 1, The Peoples of Chult. I'm your guide, Graham, and this is Lore Diver, the podcast about lore, world building, and alternative takes on how to take stuff in-game and in lore and use it in your game to make it better. So, tonight is going to be quite... so many notes went into tonight. It's ridiculous. Tonight I'm diving into some of the deepest lore in the Forgotten Realms. Campaign setting on the creator race known as the Sarrukh. Why? Because it lays out the lore foundation for not just for like stuff in the Peoples of Chult series, but it also underpins a whole bunch of the most momentous moments in the setting's history. Also because the Sarrukh are back, like they are operating, they are bad news, and yeah. Okay. Let's dive into this. This is some pretty terrifying stuff. Yeah. So, right off top, the history and editions. I haven't been able to find any definitive evidence of the Sarrukh existing by name prior to 3rd edition. However, in 2nd edition, I found a lot of stuff. There's talk about serpent cults, ancient monsters, old gods, all that sort of stuff. And it seems like it was all sort of theoretical prior to 3rd edition when they were fleshed out and presented during that edition's massive expansion to the lore of the Forgotten Realms. So it's kind of a bit of a Conan the Barbarian sort of thing going on. Talk about snake cults, evil, serpent this, serpent that, all that sort of thing, and that's all back in the day. That's all the 2nd edition stuff. Come 3rd edition, the Sarrukh are definitively introduced into the setting, and in a serious way. The problem is like a lot of other things in the 3rd edition, there was so much information out there that it made actually tracking it all quite difficult. And because it was difficult to track, it was very easy for this stuff to fall through the cracks and not be introduced into people's games. So what happened in 3rd edition was they filled a number of gaps. They tied up not only stuff to do with the Days of Thunder, but also eras in the future involving the Sarrukh. They were influenced and helped to shape Netheril. They were deeply involved in Chult and all those sorts of places, the Old Kingdoms, and more. Now, there are 2 big books. Like, if you want to read about this stuff yourself, see where I got my information from, and make your own decisions or introduce it in. The 2 big books for the Sarrukh are the Serpent Kingdoms and the Grand History of the Realms. Both the 3rd edition books. I cannot recommend these 2 books enough as far as lore stuff goes. They are outstanding, and the Serpent Kingdoms book will literally rewrite how you see the Forgotten Realms and huge parts of the Forgotten Realms. It is phenomenal. The other nice thing was that even though they were introduced in 3rd edition, there was very little in the way of sort of that sloppy bolt-on addition sort of thing that has happened before. It was actually a very smooth addition to the existing world. So it was good. It was really good. I liked it. Now, if the Sarrukh were a thing in 3rd edition, they were the thing in 4th. Now, normally 4th edition, I can skip over it more or less when it comes to lore, largely because it didn't run long enough to really produce a lot of information on anything. There's just, it's good to get an idea of where cultures were prior to 5th edition, for the few that it talks about, but that's about it. For the Sarrukh, on the other hand, wow, there's a lot of stuff in the Sarrukh in there. They got some serious love in 4th edition. It's fantastic. And it was the kind of attention that leads to long-lasting effects on the setting. Even with the sundering, even with the soft reset they did. Well, soft, hard. I'm not even sure how to classify the second sundering as for retcon. But anyways, this stuff should still actually be running and happening. Now, if I had to actually peg what they were trying to do in 4th edition with the Sarrukh, I would say that they were being set up to become the major bad guys. The setting was high magic, heavily revamped and altered. Like the fourth edition Forgotten Realms was all except for like the names of people and things was almost indistinguishable from the traditional Forgotten Realms that people were used to. And so it seemed like they were setting up the Sarrukh to be the main bad guys and sort of replace the Zentarum and the Red Wizards of Thay and the more traditional villains of the setting with these new ones, these new horrible, horrifying, scaly new ones. However, the edition ended before any significant expansion could be added to it. It was sort of like they laid a lot of foundation. They got a lot of stuff going, a lot of moving parts. But then, fourth edition imploded on itself and no more information. Now, fifth edition hasn't touched on them as of yet. And I'm putting a big as of yet there because I think, like my gut feeling, especially with them talking about going to the Shar and other places like that, is that we're going to see some Sarrukh in the future because that's their stomping grounds down around there. They are very well established, and they're going to be causing problems for just about everybody. And I say that because literally no one is tracking them. Elminster's not watching them. Nobody seems to be bothered with this, primeval evil that is literally slumbering under the ground all over the place and waiting to take over the world again. So that's how things went through the editions. Then it gets fun. We actually get into like the history and the current state in the campaign setting. So the history. The Sarrukh predate everything in the game almost, or in the setting almost. They actually come out of the Shadow Epoch, which was that time when the Primordials and the Elder Gods were laying the boots to each other in an effort to establish dominance over the planet. And ultimately, Abteo betrays the Primordials, sides with the gods. They manage to kill, imprison, or drive away the remaining immortals. And it's out of that the Sarrukh emerge onto the planet. They are the oldest known civilization. They are the oldest and most proficient magic users. They are capable of things that other races in the game can only dream about in their most fevered imaginings. So that was, before the time before time. Now getting into the actual time stream, basically from like minus 35,000 to minus 34,500 DR, Dale Reckoning. And this is how far back the Sarrukh are going, way back into the Days of Thunder. The Sarrukh rise up. They are top dog. They are establish a continent spanning empire because they have their own. I can't even pronounce it. It's like Marabobos. Yeah, I'm not going to try. It's a Pangea sort of operation is how the entire realms is at this point. And they establish a continent spanning empire. And the main parts of it are in Okoth. Let's see here. I actually have to physically read this. Istosefil. I'm just going to call it Isto. So Okoth, Isto, and Mershalk. And these correspond roughly to modern Okoth, which is south of Mulhorand. It's still on the big world maps if you look it up. The Anarok Desert is where Isto was. And finally, you've got the Chult Peninsula, which is where the Mershalk was. The Mershalk jungles, Mare Peninsula, kind of dropping some hints there with that naming. So this is like their major empire centers have risen up. And they also have the formation something unique, something that you don't see with anybody else. And that's they formed the Ba Atith. This is going to be a rough day for pronunciation. which was an organization that studied the primitive forms of magic being practiced by various races. So, unlike most other groups in the game who are sort of like, oh yeah, yeah, they practice magic, but our magic's better. The Sarrukh were like, okay, they're practicing magic. Go study it, find out if it's better. If it is better, bring it back. If it's not better, at least we know what their magical level is. And that's how they rolled. And it would go on like this for centuries until, like, rather rapidly, you have civil strife develop in Okoth, and Mayor Chult just sort of like gets all, does the classic sort of, how people perceive Rome having gone down, just becoming really decadent and lethargic, all that sort of stuff. And that all happens around, like minus 34,500 minus 33,500 DR. It's in there. And so they're slowly fading out and like falling apart. It's not good. And then Isto, up where Anarok is now, where Netherall would be in the future, you've got a whole bunch of mages at a place called Urim, and they pen the Nether Scrolls. And if you don't know anything about the Nether Scrolls are the definitive work of magic in the realms. There's a whole set of them. Just getting one of them is enough to bump any magic user who has it up and beyond any level of sort of normal magic that other people would have access to. Each scroll contains an infinite number of spells, and even just reading through a scroll once will instantly give that magic user more powerful magic and a better understanding of how magic operates. It is insane. And the Sarrukh are the ones who wrote them. And these things are so powerful that even the Sun Elves, who decided that the Sundering was a good idea, in their effort to create some beachfront property for themselves that nobody else could get to, even they decided, hey, we shouldn't use these. This is too powerful. And it actually leads, it's a dichotomy in magic. In Forgotten Realms, the style of magic that is used in the modern era is actually elven magic. It's the use of verbal, somatic, and ingredients as required. The magic used with the Nether Scrolls and the practice of magic that they teach only requires verbal and somatic. It does not use any ingredients whatsoever. It is literally like, here's how you take magic stuff and make it, like the stuff of magic, and make it into what you want. So they write those. Then, of course, everyone's favorite date at this point, minus 31,000 Dale Reckoning, the Tearfall happens. I've talked about this before. It'll come up a lot, especially talking about this part of the world and the history of it. And so this was the simultaneous fall of the Batrachi Empire as they start losing in a war against the giants and unleash some primordials, one of whom throws an ice moon at the planet. And at the same time that's going down, you have a meteor storm that may or may not be dragon eggs falling onto the planet. And then, just because, why not, the elves in the future cast the Sundering spell that travels backwards and forwards through time, and so the face of the planet gets rearranged. Not a good day to be on the planet. Not a good time to be cold-blooded and on the planet. So this pretty much spells the end of the cold-blooded people's empires on Toril. The Batrachi Empire falls apart rapidly, and the Sarrukh, most of them ditch the planet in favor of going out into the plains. The handful that stay behind either go into a form of suspended animation, or they become powerful undead like greater mummies and liches and stuff like that. So that was the end. The Sarrukh influence on the world dropped off at that point. But don't worry, it picks up again. And just for perspective on how powerful the Sarrukh are, around 6,000 DR, some elves found a Sarrukh mummy that was still asleep, and they were so freaked out by the amount of power that it had, that a whole bunch of the elves volunteered to become mummies themselves to guard the place. So, like, when you have elves volunteering to become undead to guard the tomb of another undead so that nobody will possibly wake that other undead up, that's that is a problem. Big one too. Like, that's not good. So, moving on up, Netheril. Hey, I could do a whole show on, and probably will in future do a whole show on Netheril. And the Sarrukh are deeply entwined with Netheril. Netheril got its start, for all intents and purposes, when some people managed to get their hands on the Nether Scrolls. The regular humans, they get their hands on these, like, oh wow, magic. Let's see, oh, got a comment. It sounds like a rough time for everyone. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. Bad days. Anyway, so the people of Netheril, the proto-Netherese, get a hold of these Nether Scrolls. They start learning magic. Elves intervene immediately, and they're like, "Hey guys, don't do magic that way. Do it our way." So they're like, "Okay, cool. We have teachers. They're going to teach us how to do magic." At which point, a Sarrukh Lich decides, "Hey, I want to see what I can do. I want to see how far I can take this and where it'll go." So he disguises themselves as a human and becomes known as the Terra Seer. That's Terra as in like Terra, Earth, sort of thing, to the Netherese, because they have the ability to actually see anything happening around the world. Because, I mean, it's a Sarrukh. Their magic level is essentially unlimited at this point, especially when they're a Lich. And they usher the Netherese away from all that pesky elven magic, which, it describes as being inferior, and it's not wrong. It is a weaker form of magic that, it basically makes use of more crutches instead of just teaching the people how to use magic as is. So guides them away from that, gets them into this the Netherese style of magic that we all know and love, and just like guides them, leaves for a bit, comes back a few centuries later. Hey, what's going on? Hey, I see you need some more guiding. It does this repeatedly. And not only that, but like it becomes an integrated part of the Netherese, like their bodies of magical learning, to the point where they're even giving out like prophecies and prophetic warnings, which included one for Karsus's folly, which was when Karsus tried to like become a god by absorbing the god of magic and realized, what an insanely dumb idea that was, which is ultimately what like sort of screwed everyone on the planet out of awesome magic, because prior to that, anybody could do magic. Like if you had 2 IQ points you could rub together and could figure out how to wiggle your fingers the right way, you could do magic. Anybody could do cantrips. Level 1 and 2 spells were within the capabilities of most people, and there was unlimited spell advancement. Like you go all the way up to like level 12 was Karsus's Folly, and there's some other spells that I think qualify as having been level 12, such as the spell the elves cast cast for the Sundering, and a few other things that sort of went wrong in Netheril itself, which included like a sun cannon, a spell of some, I can't remember the name of the spell, but it involved suns, beams, and it destroyed a floating city. So that's where they were. Now, of course, we're limited to 10th level magic only, but D&D only goes up to 9th level. So remember that next time you're playing a magic user, that 10th level magic is possible in the Forgotten Realms. But back onto topic, though. So he's doing that. The place, Netheril eventually falls, and then things are sort of quiet for a few millennia until minus 304, at which point Seth, and I'm saying Seth because there's 2 S's, so I'm guessing it's supposed to be a longer S, decides to get serious after millennia of sort of half-arsing the battle against Obteo and trying to take over Chult. Fires up the Mareschalk region again, renames the place Serpentes, tells the Yuan-ti that are living there that it's time to get the let out and start conquering the place, and they actually do a pretty good job. So that's shortly after that you see the Thingth lose their thousands of years conflict against the disorganized Serpent folk. They lose it to an organized one while the civil war is happening between the Tabaxi and the Ashowe. And yeah, just stuff's going on there. Good times. And then the last firm historical date that I have for them was in 1358, when Seth and Ubtao went toe to toe in Avatar form. So, giant serpent versus giant Tyrannosaurus Rex battling in the skies on the borders of Chult. It's probably one of the coolest things I've imagined in a little while. That's pretty wicked. So that happened, but around the same time, the remaining Sarrukh and Alkoth, because there's still a few there, decided to stab Seth in the back and bound him and put him to sleep, basically, and turned to the worship of the interloper deity Set, because he promised more power in exchange for worship. I mean, it's a raw deal, but they decided to do it. So, and that was the last firm sort of date. Now, I say that because that was when 3rd edition stopped tracking things, and the Grand History of the Realms only goes up to the Time of Troubles and just a little bit past, and then it stops. After that, everything is sort of picking and finding it in other books. So we would sort of leap to the current state of things, which is in 1491-ish, depending on when your game's running. So, Alkoth is back. It is being rebuilt. It is south of Mulhorand. There is literally nobody in the area who is able to deal with them in any way, shape, or form at the moment. Okay, so it's been restored at Azulduth, which is the name of its capital. It's being ruled directly by the Sarrukh. It is rebuilding slowly and secretly, and it's trying to avoid drawing the attention of more established realms, which in that area is super easy, because right now Mulhorand is not quite ripping itself apart yet, but it will be soon, because they just came off being ruled by the Emisscari. High Emisscar is sort of scattered all over the place, and their gods just ordered them to release all their slaves, and nobody can be slaves anymore, and they've been a slave-based society for the last, several millennia. So I don't imagine that's going over so well. So there's a ton of freed slaves and probably some serious social issues. So Mulhorand's not doing anything, and Unther's busy trying to fight against against Time-Anther, which is the nation of Dragonborn that appeared on the planet during the spell plague. So yeah, there are no powers in the area to stop Alkoth from growing and becoming more powerful. And so that's over in the Old Kingdoms area. So if you're playing any games around Mulhorand, Unther, Jacenta, Termish, or even just you're over on the eastern part of the Shar, all that sort of thing, the likelihood of running into groups being like scaly races being controlled or directed by the Sarrukh is quite high. And if you've got something that they want or need, the chances of you getting snatched are equally high. So let's move over. We'll come west now. And yeah, so who likes the Sword Coast? Most people. The Sword Coast and the Heartlands are sort of considered the default starting region for the Forgotten Realms campaign setting. The only large-scale map that we have for 5th edition is of the Sword Coast and Heartlands area. Smack dab in the middle of that is Najara. Now, Najara is very easy to, overlook. It's a weird name. It's sort of in the middle of nowhere. Not a lot of information about it. And, yeah, that is because it is a giant scaled race, Sarrukh influenced operation smack dab in the middle of the Sword Coast Heartlands region. It is all kinds of bad news. They control the marsh of Chalimber. They control the Wormwood. They control pretty much anything. If it has Serpent in the name and it's on that part of it's around that area, they're running it. And like the scary part of it is that they have a group there called Ophidians, and I'll get into more details about them later. But Ophidians are probably the most dangerous thing that they currently have, and you would not think of it to see them. So I'll talk about them though in a minute. Now, coming down to areas where, more pertinent to the peoples of Chult, down in the Shining South area, you have Halrua. Near Halrua, you've got Rethild. Inside Rethild, it's a giant gross swamp. Nobody likes it. No one likes adventuring there. All that sort of thing. Yeah, that is full of Lizardfolk. They are allied with various dragons. They are living on top of a sunken Sarrukh city. So it's sort of sunk into the swamp. It has probably got a fair amount of undead Sarrukh under it and or influencing it, because the Lizardfolk there, pardon me, are far more organized and far more capable than they otherwise would be. Which, when we get into talking about the Sarrukh themselves, you'll understand why. Next up, Chaslene. So the Sarrukh love experimenting on people and things, and they need subjects. So if you look at your map, if you look at a map that includes Halrua, you'll see a little place called Pirates Bay. Whole ships have been disappearing from Pirates Bay. Where have they been disappearing to? Well, there's a couple of Sarrukh that are working the area out of an ancient temple of theirs, and they are kidnapping whole ships for experiments. It's collected to Illimar, which is north of them, north of Rethild, and Okoth, of course, because, Okoth is the center of Sarrukh influence at the moment. And finally, Illimar. Illimar is it's in the woods. It's just north of that marsh, Rethild, and it is a Sarrukh influence and controlled Lizardfolk and Naga operation there. So you've got Nagas, you've got Lizardfolk. They are operating at a much higher level and with much more powerful magic than either group normally has. There are tombs to several undead Sarrukh there, and at least one of them is operating. So, bad times. And the final point for the final 2 points for, the state of the place is Seth. Seth is back. Seth woke up. Seth is angry. Loyal Sarrukh and Yuan-ti purged the set-based group out in Okoth. Seth is back in the saddle and more powerful than ever after his short enforced nap. And he is keen to get active and get his favorite scaley races back on top of the things. Now this final one, this is more for, if you hate or love your players, I guess, depending on what direction you want to go with it. And that's the Buried Realms. So, Isto was where Netheril was, which is where Anarok is now. That giant, stupid desert. I hate that desert. Anyways, there's empty caverns that once housed the Pteramen and all sorts of craziness. The thing is that underneath all that are Sarrukh. The Sarrukh have actually defeated the Pteramen in the past. They didn't do it by trying to out-magic them. They literally flooded them out. They redirected an entire sea and destroyed their own ecosystem in order to kill the Pteramen. It's actually pretty impressive. Not smart, but impressive. And now the remainders of when Netheril was still a nation, floating above, you had all those shades and stuff in 4th edition. They were actually starting to vie with the Sarrukh, because the Sarrukh were hey, we're awake, we don't like what you're doing, and the Netherese were well, we're the Netherese, what are you going to do about it? They're about that. There's only a few of us, but we're way more powerful than you. So they were starting to have it out. However, stuff on the surface, and let's see here. What type of lore do I speak of? Oh, this is all stuff. This is all out of the books. This is D&D and Forgotten Realms right now. And in future, I'll be going into other games as well. So, little interlude there, answer the question. So yeah, so they were duking it out. They were having it out. However, things on the surface happened. Ultimately, New Netheril fell apart and was destroyed. So now things are more or less back to the status quo. Personally, I think there should still be a Netheril. I think that at least part of the desert should be back to the green sort of thing it was, but I'm not in charge, unfortunately. So yeah, that happens. And so yeah, there's underneath Anarok, there are slumbering and waking super liches that nobody is paying any attention to. So, on to the fun part. So, what my take on how things can be done and everything else like that. And to get into that, first we have to talk a little bit about like what exactly the Sarrukh can do. Because, I've alluded to them being powerful. I've alluded to them having all these abilities. Well, let's actually talk about those. So, they are on record as having created the Lizardfolk, the Terrafolk, like the pterodactyl people. They indirectly created the Ophidians. They created the Asabi, which are like lizardfolk but in the desert. Troglodytes, which are lizardfolk but underground. Yuan-ti, which they created because they wanted some self-aware, more self-aware, more intelligent minions they could give instructions to and trust them to carry on alone. Serpents, and so many more. Like, they created intelligent, like drakes, mutant serpents, all sorts of bad stuff that's there to come out and make your day miserable if you're an adventurer. So they created all that. The Sarrukh themselves are insanely powerful. Each Sarrukh is surrounded by a field of dread that non-Sarrukh and creatures that aren't their minions are immediately struck by. And it was like I think it was a whiz save or something like that, like a 21 back in the day to get around that. They have lots of magic. So they really like lizards. Yes, they do in fact really like lizards and snakes. That was their bag. Snakes, serpents, lizards, drakes, pretty much everything. They were involved in it. So on that though, the transmutation powers. So there's a reason why the Sarrukh can command the Yuan-ti and so many of these other, and I believe this will most likely extend to other groups as well. And that's that they can physically transmute them at will. And I don't mean like cast a spell. I mean a Yuan-ti displeases their Sarrukh master, so the Sarrukh master alters their physiology so that it's something that oxygen is poisonous to. Or, turns them inside out. Or just seals their head up. Like, we're getting like serious body horror sort of stuff here. That's an ability that's like an at-will ability they have. And then in addition to that, they can command all the races they created. Every last one of them. So, troglodytes, which are a huge, if underused, faction in the Underdark, they can control them. Lizardfolk, they can control them. Nagas, they can control them. Asabi, Terrafolk, all of them, they can control them. And not only can they control them, but they can reach out to them like prior to them even arriving and prep the whole place. And this is something that the Yuan-ti have been freaking out about. They talk about it in the 4th edition books, is how the Yuan-ti are scared right now because the Sarrukh were functionally gone. And then all of a sudden they start getting these like feelings that, the Sarrukh are coming back and they have to do things for them. They have to, follow their orders, do all this sort of stuff. And it is terrifying to them because Yuan-ti are not used to being in that situation. So they have all these sorts of abilities, and all these things are actually they hardwired all of this into their creation. So it's not a case of, that they were just in charge of the Yuan-ti after they created them. It's that they have the ability to impose their will onto the Yuan-ti and onto Lizardfolk and all these other groups, and literally not have them be able to fight against it. So That's some serious business in the game, because that can screw, yeah, it can screw everything up. Let's see. Oh crap! The bosses are back. Look busy. Exactly. Yeah, everybody. Nobody has been busy in the right ways, pretty much either. And so that leads into a whole bunch of possibilities for play and DM use and other things. And like first and foremost is that the Sarrukh don't share well. Like they do not like sharing minions with other groups. And right now there is a demon lord named S1E4 who is trying to take over the Lizardfolk. And they do it by they give lizard kings and lizard queens, which are basically like Cambion lizard folk, like part demon or like demon infused lizard folk, all sorts of powers, and sends them out to like lead tribes and like bring them over to his worship. Yeah, they're not down with that, and like if anything would bring lizard folk over to the sides of them, aside from the literal fact they can impose their will on them, it's they just have to show up and run the show of these demon creatures, and bang, they're in. So what are some things that can be done with them? Well, first off, the Yuan-ti are everywhere. Like, they are functionally everywhere in the game. And they can be called on by the Sarrukh at any point to do their bidding, to do whatever it is that the Sarrukh need to have done, things that they need to have done. And that means that all through Chult, the Chultan Peninsula, the Shining South, then up north into the entire lands of intrigue, and even into like the Heartlands and Sword Coast, and then over to the Old Kingdom, there are people with that Yuan-ti blood, if even if they're not purebloods, that can be called on by these guys to do their bidding, to get the ball rolling, to do all these little things they need done so they can reconquer the place and establish themselves as a power again. Which is ultimately what they want. And to me, this actually makes them scarier than aboleths. And like, I love the aboleth. Like, they are one of my favorite villains in the game. One of my favorite like evil groups. And pardon me, the Yuan-ti actually are scarier. Not the Yuan-ti, sorry, the Sarrukh are actually scarier than the aboleths. And it's because the aboleths, ultimately, their main issue is that they're completely aquatically based. Like they need to have water around them, and all of their minions aren't particularly super effective. And so, yeah, they're a threat. Yeah, they're super dangerous. Yeah, they can do a lot of crazy stuff, and they've got like a UFO or something like that over in the Shining, not the Shining Sea, sorry, the Sea of Fallen Stars, and all sorts of things like that. But they don't have the sheer coverage over the regular played world that the Sarrukh do. Like, they don't in any way, shape, or form. And so there's all sorts of things you can do with these guys. One of them is you can introduce them as changing magic. Like, magic in the Forgotten Realms is highly malleable, and Mistral was pretty free reign with it, and the Mistras that have followed have been off and on. And I mean, like, for the entire Spell Plague era, the gloves were off. All the prohibitions about magic were gone. And so, like, 10th level spells, well, they were always available, were more available. 11th level spells became available again. And in theory, they could have even developed 12th level spells during that era and used them, because there were no restrictions on the weave. And with Mistra back, like, the Mistras have been tremendously unreliable insofar as actually, like, making sure everything works properly or everything is maintained. And so it's entirely possible that after Mistra's time, I think she was a bear or something, before Elminster and a whole bunch of the Seven Sisters had to die to bring her back to being a functional goddess again. I don't know. Anyways, there's a good chance that some of those restrictions may not have been reactivated in all the, thud and blunder of getting things going again. And the promise of new magic that doesn't require ingredients, that lets you reach into the weave and actually manipulate it in ways that it hasn't been manipulated in millennia, is a very, very powerful call to a lot of people. And so they could enter the you could use them in the game in that sense, that they're offering this if you'll do maybe a little job for them, or if you can get them access to this, they'll maybe give you access to some new magic that would be very handy. Another option that you can go for, because we've got Lizardfolk and Yuan-ti are available as player races in the Volo's Guide to Monsters, is you could literally have a battle for freedom. This ties into magic again, but you know what? Nobody likes being, told what to do. People like it less when they literally don't have a choice because they've been magically hardwired to follow the commands of the other group. And so in the Tomb of Annihilation, I believe it was in the Adventurers League, one of the Adventurers League adventures for it, it mentions that the adventurers encounter a group of pure-blood Yuan-ti who are making their own village and just trying to live normal lives. And for me, this indicates that there's some schisms happening in the Yuan-ti culture, finally, where some are trying to break away. And now the Sarrukh are a huge threat to that. Like, they're down with freedom as long as it's freedom to do what they want you to do. So trying to find some magical artifact or ritual or divine interference or something that would allow for freedom from the influence of the Sarrukh would be a huge thing if you wanted to run a monster campaign. Get a bunch of Lizardfolk and Yuan-tis of various sorts, going out on an adventure to try to figure out how to defeat this enemy who can literally, warp their bodies at will and command them with, almost, undeniable power. So there's that. It's an option. Then you could have a secret war with the Netherese. And, the Netherese, people like to act like, the main city's destroyed, they're gone. No. Right now, northern Faerun, so like Sembia, the part of Anarok that's near that, the places around Zental Keep, probably down into Cormyr, all that sort of stuff. That place is literally awash right now with Netherese. And I'm not talking like people whose ancestors way back were Netherese. I'm talking about like ethnically and culturally Netherese people. And odds are a fair number of them are going to be wanting to try to reestablish Netheril in some way, shape, or form. That's just not going to be in the form that gets crashed into Mithranor. But that's a whole separate rant. So this would be a secret war. This would be a lot of cloak and dagger stuff. This would be a lot of missions for strange groups, missions for strange benefactors, who are trying to gather up artifacts, items, information, all that sort of stuff. And it would all be a conflict between these groups of Netherese who are trying to reestablish Netheril for good or evil. Like that part's completely up to you. Of course, well, all this is up to you. It's your table, right? Versus the Sarrukh, who are trying to hoard all this information back or use it for their own gains. And this could all be happening up around Sembia, Cormyr, that area. Another one is round 2 with the Pteramen. So the Pteramen are probably my least favorite monster in the Forgotten Realms. To be blunt, I think they're kind of stupid. They're just sort of like this OP, ridiculous, magic-using thing that just they don't make sense. I hate that that their presence creates the Anarok Desert, which is a hot desert in a place where it should be a temperate and then cold desert. And I really want them gone in like the worst way. And I think that round 2 with the Pteramen would be fantastic because the Sarrukh have beaten them before. And the Sarrukh, they need magic. Like, they need to be able to use magic in unfettered ways that the Pteramen don't like. And so they are likely to put the tools into the hands of adventurers and other groups to lay the boots to the Pteramen for them and clear them out. And this is one of those like adventures where where the player's gonna be going in with like the best of intentions and like, yeah, like we're gonna help save the realms, we'll clear these monsters out, and in reality they're actually helping other monsters. So I think that's a good idea. Plus, then everybody can take markers and turn that part of the world greenish again. Because, man, like I hate that desert. Anyways, down to Chult. Who likes some conquest? The Sarrukh likes some conquest. And that's what's on the table. Chult, the shining south, through the Shar over to the Old Kingdoms, that whole area, like that is the Sarrukh homeland, pretty much. Like it's all the weather they like, it's all the terrain they like, it's all everything they like, and the Sarrukh want it, and they've wanted it for millennia. They've been fighting wars against Tau and other groups there forever. They need to build up. They need to organize. They need to get going. The main obstacles that they're going to be facing, well, not a lot. Really, it's just Helrua. Because everything else got the boots laid to it, something fierce, and they're just not functional anymore. Like Mesro, gone. Mesro's not in the game anymore. So, and like Thindol was mostly underwater. It's not in the game. Samrak is probably pretty beat up, and it's already crazy infested with Yuan-ti. So, yeah. Like there's just a ton of stuff you can do, and they're going to want to control that whole area. And like they are going to roll in and sort of reestablish that hierarchy they had before, where you have the Sarrukh on top, you have their relatively free-willed minions below them, which is the Yuan-ti. Then below them, you've got the the Terrafolk, which they would give back their power to transform back and forth between the shapes they used to have. You've got the Lizardfolk, you've got Troglodytes, you have all these other forces they could draw in, build up their numbers, and then spread out. And there's not a lot anyone could do to stop them right now. Because, like, as I said, the whole place is infested with Yuan-ti, so, like, we're talking that they could sabotage the city from the inside out before anyone would even know what's going on. And, so that particular adventure, or that particular campaign, could be run from either side. You could have the characters being Lizardfolk, Yuan-ti, and so on, with the Sarrukh either working for or against them, to the best of their ability. Or you could have, poor beleaguered humans trying to stop this sudden invasion, trying to get Helrua to take action for once. Which is a big thing that I think I should mention now, and that's the Sarrukh, no matter how you use them or how you introduce them to your game, they are not the good guys. It's very seldom that I see a group in the game where there's not a lot of nuance involved in them, and the Sarrukh are one of them. Like, this is one of those cases where if there was a good Sarrukh, or a Sarrukh who at least wasn't actively malign, it would be such a tremendous rarity that it would boggle the mind. Like, it's past being a statistical outlier. And that's because of the firm integration they have with their god Seth, who they are literally an expression of him on the world for all intents and purposes. So definitely not the good guys, definitely not doing things that are good for the people of Toril at all. And so now we're going to just talk quickly about two other minions that aren't going to be covered in the Peoples of Chult, because they're not, well, one of them is sort of present, but it's worth talking about here, and the other one is not present. And these are the Ophidians and Serpents. So Ophidians are horrifying snake people that used to be humans or elves or dwarves or whatnot. And basically what happened is they started worshipping Seth, they started worshipping serpents, they found some Sarrukh-inspired Yuan-ti artifacts and magical rituals that allow them to turn themselves into serpent creatures. and they're creating them, turning themselves into a servitor race. Like, they are enthusiastic and excited to support their serpent masters in what they are doing. And they look like snakes, but with human arms and hands and shoulders. So pretty horrifying. Well, that's not the most horrifying part of them, though. The most horrifying part of them is that they can reproduce in in several ways. One, naturally, which, well, I say naturally, but it's super unnatural. Two, by bite. If you are bitten by an Ophidian, there's some saves that you have to make, and it's one of those ones where if you make the save, you die, and that's a good thing. If you fail the save, you begin a painful process of turning into an Ophidian over several weeks. Let's see. Oh, we got a comment here. And most would have a technically neutral Sarrukh. Yeah, technically neutral would probably be the best that you could find with them. Yeah, absolutely. Good call. So yeah, the Ophidians. Yeah, so they if they bite you and you make the save, you turn into one of these things. And the other way they can reproduce is through that ritual, but that ritual doesn't have to be one that you willingly participate in. They can literally just tie you down, do the ritual, make you drink the gross serpent drink, and then wait. And if you pass your save, you start turning into one. If you fail your save, you die or start dying. The problem is, though, is that certain types of Yuan-ti have the ability to neutralize poison. And so if they see that you haven't transformed into something useful, they can stop it and restart it. And just keep doing that until you turn into an Ophidian or until they get bored. And that's actually, like, the Yuan-ti can do that with their reproduction as well, like for warping people. It's pretty messed up. But these things are all over the place in the Serpent Hills areas and Marsh of Chillimber and all those things in the middle of the Heartlands and Sword Coast. So, and they're not a well-known monster, because even though the whole place is technically classified as a kingdom, it doesn't engage in trade or anything else with anyone, because D&D, it's not what they do. Well, not what they did. I'm hoping that they'll make better integrated worlds as time goes on, but because they don't interact with anyone, no one knows anything about them. And so characters are likely to think that they ran into some pretty easy to beat serpent people. Awesome, we beat them, got bit, don't worry, I made my saves. And then over the next few weeks, they turn into a horrifying Ophidian. So yeah, that's one of their minions. The other one are were-serpents, and were-serpents are possibly the most insidious agents of the Sarrukh that there are, because they are everywhere. Any place that's near Yuan-ti, any place where the Sarrukh feel they need to have eyes and ears, is where you'll find were-serpents. And were-serpents in their human form are attractive, nice, awesome, all that sort of stuff. They're to read the description, actually, they read like a charismatic sort of hero. And they are charismatic, they are highly intelligent, and so they're frequently involved in like mercantile activities, adventuring, or trade. And their job is to be the eyes and ears of the Yuan-ti in places where even sending a pureblood Yuan-ti would be hazardous because they may be detected. Were-serpents, about the only thing that I can tell that separates them from normal humans is that to Yuan-ti, humans smell terrible. Like, there's a stink about us that, they don't like. And were-serpents don't have that. But they also don't bother dogs or anything else like that. So, good times there. And they're confirmed to be in places like Chult and the Chultan Peninsula and anywhere that's around the Yuan-ti. However, they're also confirmed to be in Tether. There's a fallen noble family that's mentioned there, where they're actually, like, there's a component of their family that is were-serpents. So, yeah, like this is something that I was hoping to like drive home with all this, is that the Sarrukh are everywhere. They have agents almost everywhere, in almost every climate, in almost every location in Faerun. There's somebody or something of theirs waiting, and they're coming back. Like they're waking, like their undead are waking up. The ones who are in suspended animation are waking up. They're trying to sort themselves out because they need to start reproducing Sarrukh. They need to start reproducing Lizardfolk. They need to start reproducing more Yuan-ti, more Ophidians, more of all their minions to get back in the saddle. And so there's an entire thing happening in the world that like almost it's not being tracked, because like when you crack open your D&D or Forgotten Realms, you're thinking, oh yeah, we're gonna fight orcs, kobolds, all those goblins, dragons, all that sort of stuff. And not a lot of people think about like, well, what about all these serpent people? They're not a popular monster, and I think they should be. Like, I love them. I think they're great, but they're there, they're active, and they're doing things. And the Sarrukh are guiding almost all of it, and will be guiding more of it as more of them wake up, as more of them take over. And the big thing I got out of these books is that all the like lizard folk and terra folk and stuff like that we're troglodytes we're used to seeing in the monster manuals are all the dumbed down version. Like they're all the versions on autopilot, pretty much. Like they're the robots just doing what they're programmed to do continuously, waiting for that controller to come back, because that's how the Sarrukh created them. So when the Sarrukh show back up, all of a sudden they go from operating at like 60% capacity back to 100%. Their magical skills go up, their tactical acumen goes up, their strategic capabilities go up, everything increases. And so, within the context of the Forgotten Realms, it's a situation where you would have adventurers who are like, oh yeah, I've fought lizard folk, I know how they operate, let's go, we'll show them what's what. And they'll get destroyed, like wiped out, no problem, because they suddenly run into an enemy who is far more powerful and capable than they are used to dealing with. So, yeah, that is the Sarrukh, an abbreviated version of it. Mostly because I didn't want to read, like, there's literally like 7 pages of information and research I printed out there to read over for this, and that wasn't even going into the pages of notes that came out of the Serpent Kingdoms book. Suffice to say that, just about anywhere is not safe and is potentially in trouble. So that has been Lore Diver episode 4 of series 1, the Peoples of Chult. So next week I'm continuing the scaly kind. Oh my brain just shut down again. It's this heat, I tell you. So we're continuing on with the examination of the scaly kind races, and we are going with everyone's favorite snake race to hate, the Yuan-ti. That's right, next week is all about the Yuan-ti and all the craziness that is associated with them. So thank you very much for listening. This has been Lore Diver, the POCGamer podcast. If you liked what you heard and want to see more, head over to my blog, POCGamer.com. You want to watch previous episodes, that's over on YouTube. And if you want to follow me on social media, check out POCGamer on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. If you'd like to support this podcast, there's links to my coffee and on my blog and in my social media. And music was provided by purple-planet.com. Thank you for listening, and have a great day. Ah.